Enough about the backdrop. Enough about me being a goldfish.
Enough about that hairline.
Enough about my hairline. Let's talk about Opie. So, I told you earlier this week, that Opie has done about 6 or 7 Opie and Anthony videos since the last time we checked in on Opie.
When he therefore said, I'm done with Opie and Anthony.
Every time Opie talks about Opie and Anthony, he says, oh, I don't want to talk about this anymore. God, it's so stupid. People, what he always says, like, people can't let it go. It was 8 years ago. They're obsessed with the show. And meanwhile, Jimmy doesn't talk about them. Anthony doesn't really talk about him all that much.
Just when he thinks something you did was stupid and
just
funny.
when he wants to shit on Opie a little bit. Opie is the only one talking about Opie and Anthony and then gets mad at everyone else for talking about Opie and Anthony. So let's check in with Opie and all of his O&A content he's been doing. This take is maybe the worst of Opie's takes that he's ever had. If you're an O&A fan, you remember the character Uncle Paul that Jim Norton came up with. April was not a big O&A person at all, so she won't know Uncle Paul. Uncle Paul was Jim Norton's child molester character. I can play a few clips of Uncle Paul later tonight if you'd like. But he was very, very funny. And Opie said that Uncle Paul was terrible for the Opie and Anthony show. Now, as a fan, I'll speak for myself. I looked forward to every fucking Uncle Paul segment there was.
I bet you did. Dirty girl.
He would talk about like different staff members and how he molested them. Mm-hmm. You'd be listening to the show and they'd be talking about someone as a kid, and you'd all of a sudden hear Jim Norton go, "Sure." He goes, "When you were 5, I used to bounce you on my lap, and you had such a tiny little hiney." Like it was. Oh, and it's so much creepier. It was so much creepier than that. Would you like to hear some Uncle Paul before we play this clip?
I guess so.
Why don't we listen to some Uncle Paul Hargis for April, and she can decide whether or not it was a funny character or not. Uncle Paul, Opie, and Anthony.
I don't like us talking about kids' little butts. That's not okay.
All right, here we go. Uncle Paul.
Who's that old guy over there?
Take him to the ball game.
Yeah,
they showed
like
me
that
this
Uncle
in the garage.
Paul.
They did. They always had. I would load them full of soda. Then you'd have to take them to the restroom. You watch the ball game. I'm going to take Timothy.
They can't go alone. And of course, you got to take him into the stall because it's
embarrassing for the boy. You don't want the other people seeing his penis.
And the urinal's too high, so you got to go to the stall to.
Yeah, and you got to hold him over there.
Yeah, you hold him up, right?
They hover. Just drips out of there.
Oh, God.
You gotta pat his bottom to drip it all out of there. Get out of there.
Fucking Uncle.
I'm out.
Why? What do you want it to do? Stay in there? Get it all out of there.
Well, of course. That's got to get all out of there, yeah.
Yeah, you gotta make sure that there's none in the underpants. His mother's gonna have to do laundry. Clean it good.
You are a creep, Uncle Paul.
I try to go with the Uncle Paul bit, and there's always.
All right, so there's a taste of Jimmy's Uncle Paul character. So now
I think it's funny. It definitely is creepy.
It's a very funny bit. Here's Opie's take on it. And, Opie also, we watched that video where Opie couldn't understand why people didn't think he was the funny one on Opie and Anthony. Let's do a sense of humor check on Greg Opie Hughes.
The old saying, as long as you're not hurting yourself or others, then do whatever the hell you want. Did you just out Jimmy? I didn't out Jimmy. Bobby, can you go? I don't want people like you. So you're either going to be cool or not. Who cares?
You know what? Opie's kind of like Corey in that way.
A little bit.
As long as he's not being Uncle Paul. Well, that would fall into the hurting others category, sir.
Oh, fuck you. He does a child molester character, and now Mr. Shock Jock draws the line. Mr. Stomp on people's cakes. Mr. Take gifts that they give him and chuck them. Mr. Give E-Rock's phone number out on the air. You draw a line at a guy being a fictional child molester character? Fuck you, Opie, you sanctimonious douche.
Yeah, that's not cool.
Ugh.
Not at all.
And it hurt me because I just simply hated that character. I didn't think it was that great. Most of his comedian friends didn't think it was that great, but they, for whatever reason, they didn't have the balls to call him out.
Oh, right. That's why everybody in the studio would laugh their fucking balls off every time Jimmy did it.
Have you noticed that in all of his videos he comes out with now that he's shitting on one of the old cast members of that show and the thing that they did that made him funny? Like for Anthony, it's, his racism ruined the show. For Jimmy now, it's, the child molester shit. Not good for the show. It's always not good for the show when it's not something he did.
Right. And all Opie did was sit there and play Candy Crush and go, let's go to the phones and talk to Bill the trucker and just disrupt the flow of the show. Oh, man, you're right. Opie will criticize everything everyone else did to try and make that show go while contributing fucking nothing.
Yep.
So when everyone else was like, this Uncle Paul character is really creepy, it's not helping build an audience. It hurt the show. It was...
Opie, you guys were on Sirius XM in 2014. Nothing was going to help build the show anymore. You guys were supposed to go to the internet and do a podcast. You guys were never going to grow the Opie and Anthony show anymore. You were on a dead medium. Satellite radio is not growing ever again.
If anything, it's shrinking.
It's shrinking. You guys were contracting. So what Jimmy was doing a segment that the audience that already existed would love.
It's funny a few times, but sometimes it was way too much. I mean, that's what I thought.
It hurt the show.
But man, if you had an opinion on that and you told Jimmy that, oh God, he would hold a grudge for a year.
Like you don't?
Says the guy who's still talking about this shit 8 years after it was over.
It has to be miserable getting out of bed for this now every morning.
Anthony gets up every day, does a show on his network. Jimmy gets up, does a morning show every day on Sirius XM. Opie sits in his apartment and talks to 40 people on Facebook Live or YouTube and bitches about the guys who are still going out trying to do something. And they're the ones who hold grudges, Ope? Oh, dude, you are fucking delusional. I'm sorry, man. And when it's me and everybody else who watches your behavior and all of those people say the same exact thing, I'm sorry, Ope. You can convince yourself in that mentally ill brain of yours all you want, but it ain't us, pal. We're just watching what you're throwing out there. And the decision seems to be unanimous over the years. You got fucking problems, and you're the only person who sees things the way you do. Jimmy, Anthony, they still talk to everybody from the show.
Yep, and they keep up with new things on their show. They don't sit and wallow.
And they still hang out with all the old comedians and guests from the show. They all get along. You're the only one who's the odd man out. Why is that?
Fucking year. His grudges lasted a long time.
Yeah, probably because his co-host was no-selling his fucking impression character that he was doing, trying to make the show funny, and he probably got really pissed off at that.
Opie's just sitting here thinking who the fuck he is just because his name was in the title of that show back in the day, the Opie and Anthony show.
And all
he's like, well, I was clearly, just as good as he was. If not better.
All he did for that show was run the board and find the other two really funny guys. That's it. E-Rock is the producer now for Anthony's network. They obviously still get along just fine. Sam is doing a show with Jimmy.
Yeah, when you're the odd man out, there's always plenty of reasons, my friend.
Opie had two choices over the last 8 years. He could either become self-aware and realize what happened, or he could just create his own reality where everyone else is wrong and he really knows what happened, and he's chosen the latter.
Yeah, he doesn't have the personality, I think, to own up to anything.
No.
The whole Uncle Paul thing, I hated from the jump. I played along, I tried to, and I'm like, this is fucking creepy.
But no offense, Opie, you seem to be the one who understood that show the least by the time the show was over. You seem to understand what people liked about the Opie and Anthony show way less than Jimmy and Anthony did. So I don't know if I'd trust your judgment. I mean, how many times did those two have gold going on that program and you would take a call or you'd change the subject because little boy didn't think he was getting enough of the attention?
I also think he's sitting here thinking he's going to score some points, too, when he goes on his show now saying, I wasn't comfortable with the racism or the child molester stuff. I think he's trying to score points, like social points.
Ironically, it's kind of the Stuttering John thing. You take a hard left turn politically because he shits on Trump now and Alex Jones and all this stuff.
I feel like he's kind of doing the same thing.
I think he just wants to shit on everything Anthony's into because, again, jaded ex-girlfriend here just can't get over it.
Right.
And then accuses everyone else of not being able to get over it.
It's it's making our show just more in the gutter than it needs to be.
You were the Opie and Anthony show. What did you think you were? Good Morning America? Who were you, Meredith Vieira, you dipshit? You were the Opie and Anthony show. You were a trash show for trash human beings. You were an even lower brow Howard Stern. That's what we kind of liked about you.
Yeah, how did he ever get to be half of that show if he's not comfortable with any of it?
Because he discovered really funny people, but when he got insecure, he stopped letting them be as funny as they could be.
Okay.
And when his wife or when his family, in my opinion, when his wife or when his family would chastise him about the things he talked about when he came home, he tried to put, the old pull the brakes on it whenever it happened. Like how many times, like when we first started dating, would you say like you talked about this or you talked about that? I go, if you fucking try to tell me, like you're not going to tell me what I can and can't talk about. I'm going to do what I'm going to do to make an entertaining show. If you're going to be with me, I remember having this conversation with you. I said, if you're going to be with me, you got to know that. You can't be here and not be comfortable with me talking about whatever I want to. I got to be free to do my show.
That's not at all where I thought this was going.
But what I'm saying is Opie was that like first 2 weeks he would hear from people who, oh, why do you let him say that? Or, oh, what does that mean? Do you endorse that kind of thing? And instead of him just sitting them down like an adult and go, look, I got to do a show. It's art. I'm making comedy for my fans. Instead, he went, okay, schnookums, I'll talk to them about their race. I won't let him do his racism. I won't let him do his Uncle Paul humor. He's just a fucking pushover, in my opinion.
I just simply didn't like the character. Bosses didn't like the character.
Oh, yeah, and if there's anything we remember from the old Opie and Anthony show, it's that those bosses, you always told us, they totally know what they're talking about. Opie, you bitched about the bosses and talked about how often you were going to quit and leave and do something else on a damn near, not exaggerating, daily basis by the time it was over. So don't sit here and go, the management sucks, the management's awful, I want to leave. Oh, by the way, management didn't think Uncle Paul was funny. Well, which one is it? Are they fucking dipshits and don't get it? Or are you going to use them as evidence in your little court case you're doing over this 8-year grudge you have?
It's whichever's convenient.
Yeah. The 8-year grudge you have, by the way, against a fictional character.
Right. That character is not a thing. I hope you know.
Hey, Opie, Uncle Paul Hargis is not a real guy. Just letting you know, bud.
But Jimmy insisted, man. Jimmy insisted. Fucking insisted. Whatever. Thank God. Thank God. Thank God.
So he's going, whatever, like I'm done with it. Thank God it's over, says the guy who's made 7 videos in the last week about these guys.
He's almost getting sad for me to watch.
I was heavily invested in their show, and it's a big part of what my show became. So I revel in this shit. So remember, he just went, thank God, but there's still a minute and 50 some odd seconds left in this clip. So he said, thank God it's over. I didn't like that character. I'm done talking about it. Now, one thing we know about Opie is when he says he's done.
Oh, he's done.
He's done.
I think Jim Norton did a lot of good for the Opie and Anthony show, especially
like carry your ass,
especially the first half, and then not so much in the later years.
What a fucking cunt.
It's done, buddy. Can you just let it go and stop shitting on everyone?
What a cunt to say that in the second half, Jimmy didn't do so much to help the show. Opie, you mean in the second half of the show's run where you started talking less and less and doing less and less and prepping less and less? Jim Norton was the one who kind of faded from the... Oh, boy, you're delusional. While he was bringing in Bill Burr, Patrice, Louis C.K., Bobby Kelly, Colin Quinn, all these other comics, and you were sitting there and playing Candy Crush. Yeah, Jimmy, he really petered out. Take a sip of coffee, you
Not
dick.
so much. The whole show was falling apart. We all had our problems that we were bringing into that studio every day.
You had your problems. I listened to Opie and Anthony until the end. Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
Funny as shit until Anthony got fired.
Right.
A really funny show.
And Jimmy, he just decided that he had to interject his character chip into everything, and he thought it was hilarious to stop the flow. And some days it was hilarious to stop the flow, but then it was like, holy shit, he's gonna do this every single fucking time.
Yeah,
I think
because
that's a very funny character.
right, because people liked it. Hey, Opie, you know what the difference there's two differences between you and Chip Chipperson. One, Chip Chipperson's not real. But number two, he's still got a show and you don't.
And
So-
he was funny.
Yeah, well, yeah. And number three, he's funny. So, Opie, take your foot off the gas there. I don't think this is as strong of a point as you think it is.
And I think that really did get in the way of the success of the show, if you want to know the truth.
What did you want to do, Ope? Did you want to talk about which frontman for Van Halen was better? Fuck you. You never brought anything interesting to the program in the end. You didn't care. You were cashing a paycheck while Jimmy was still trying, still doing new things. And Anthony, look, yeah, Anthony had his wheelhouse that he kind of liked to stay in, but he still remembered to keep it funny most of the time.
Yep. And he's still going.
Yeah.
When he first started doing some of those characters, and he would pepper them in, yeah, it was kind of cool.
Kind
and
of
it
cool.
worked.
It rejuvenated your
But
show.
then he insisted that he would force that character into every single thing we were doing.
People thought it was
It's another
funny.
reason I just started tapping out more and more, man.
Well, at least you were tapping out.
But wait a minute. He says he's tapping out, but he says these other people didn't do much for the show. Meanwhile, you were tapping out. So while you're admitting now that they carried you on their shoulders, but they didn't do much for the show. Opie, you're so out of your depth, man. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You're just babbling. You're bitter. You miss the good old days. You miss the paycheck. I mean, look at that view. That can't be a cheap view to have.
Not at all.
That's sucking
That's
down
a-
the old income,
That's a
Opester.
spendy one.
I was just like, what is happening to our little show? What is happening? This guy's babbling. He's got multiple characters coming out of his head.
Yeah,
That's
fuck that guy
fucking fun.
fuck that guy for creating characters and trying to create new dimensions for the show.
I'm really starting to have a hard time watching him because every video kind of just turns into the bitter ex-girlfriend look.
He's very much
It's
that bitter
really
ex.
sad.
We got time for probably one more of these. Let's check in with our people in the chat here a little bit. People writing, leave it alone. Howard Stern and Opie should have a show in the future. Oh, Howard would be driven nuts. People are saying that guy's a crackhead. I don't think Opie's a crackhead.
He sure looks like one.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That is the opposite of an attractive man. He keeps himself looking disheveled.